People don't understand that there's demons amongst us even now. And demons wear clothes like we wear clothes, and that is because they're trying to fit in. They're trying to be one of us, and they're very good at disguising themselves. So they could potentially be a dog, they could be a cat, they could be any kind of animal, they could be a person, they could be your mum, your dad, and they will appear however you feel comfortable. Hi, my name's Ian Lawman and I'm a psychic and an exorcist. And I'm here to answer your questions from this honesty box. What causes somebody to be possessed? Possession is something you shouldn't take very lightly, and it's quite dangerous. Now, we tend to find that somebody who's possessed is normally low energy, maybe an addict of some kind, suffers from depression, anxiety. Now, I don't want everyone to worry and think if you're suffering from anxiety, you're going to become possessed, because the likelihood is it's not going to happen. So if somebody's possessed with an entity, it's very, very slow. I mean, there is situations where it's bang, it's like a car crash and it's in there. But the majority of people, it's very slow. So if you're like a really happy person, the first thing what would happen, you'd feel a little bit low, you'd feel depressed, you'd feel where you didn't want to eat anymore. Your friends would start to aggravate you. You start to push your family, your loved ones away. And the whole idea of this is this entity is wanting to isolate you. And then long term, if this was left out, there is stories of people committing suicide because they can't live anymore because of this entity. Now, it's not necessarily the entity that's making you commit suicide. It could be the fact that you can't cope with it anymore that's making you feel like this. So it's a very, very slow process. So it could be over months, over years, and it feeds off you. And sometimes what happens when that entity has had enough of you, it will just leave you almost like a lion feeding something or feasting off something and move on to its next victim. And that's what would happen. But you'd be left there exhausted and sometimes unable to recover. First supernatural experience. When I was a very young boy, my grandparents owned a really old farmhouse, and it had been in my family for generations and generations. And I'd never slept over at my grandma's because it used to scare me because it was a big older house. And the front room of my nana's was the laying out room, as they called it, because it was next to the cemetery. So the local council would use it to take bodies in. They would hire it off my grandma and put coffins in there, and they'd stay in there for a few days at a time because it was very, very cold. It was stone floors. But I was staying over at my grandparents' house, and I actually saw an apparition walk up the staircase into one of the bedrooms. Now, it wasn't anything to do with the laying out room. It's actually an old ancestor that used to live there, and her name was Aunt Nanny, and that was my dad's auntie. And it wasn't until the next day I realised it was my auntie because I described her to my grandma. So from that point, after seeing my grandma, I started seeing other things. So when I was going to school, I would see people walk through the walls. My mum was called into school because she thought, the teacher thought her son was disturbed, he had a problem. And sadly, my uncle and my mum did take me to the doctors and wanted to find out if there was anything wrong with me. Obviously, I was medically fit and medically sane, but it just continued, and here I am today, talking to dead people. How often do you exercise? I don't know whether they mean how often do I perform exorcism or how often do I go to the gym. I exercise quite frequently, but exorcism, it varies. Sometimes we can go through a couple of months with none, and then sometimes we can go through a couple of months with several. So normally what would happen is you would go to your local parish, you would then get your local vicar, priest or minister out. They would come and bless you and bless the house, walk around the house with just a Bible reading. Sometimes they potentially could use holy water, depends which religion you come from. If that failed, then you would also ask for another priest or local vicar to come out. And then if that vicar or priest or reverend decided it was a little bit more sinister, a little bit more darker than they can deal with, or they don't understand it, they would put in what we call application for exorcism, which would then go to the local bishop, and then it'd be the bishop who looks at it and decides whether this, I don't want to use the word deserves an exorcism because that sounds quite callous, but they look at it to see if it warrants an exorcism. Then once that's been written or wrote off, then the exorcist would do a visit. and that's how that works. But it's a last resort for an exorcism. Why is it always creepy dolls that are haunted? I think dolls look creepy. I've just actually had my sister's doll repaired. I lost my sister many years ago, and loads of people said that looked creepy. Do I believe that every creepy doll is haunted? Certainly not. Do I believe that every antique furniture is haunted? Certainly not. So I believe that it's certain objects that are haunted, and it's the same as dolls. I think it's only certain dolls that are haunted. And I think from my experience, I've felt anything negative lights things with eyes. So creepy dolls, pictures with eyes. And I think it's a way of this negative energy watching you and watching every single move you do. So there is dolls out there that are definitely haunted. But there's also certain cults, certain belief systems that perform voodoo, which is a form of witchcraft. And I believe they put it in an object like a doll, because dolls are loved by young children, dolls are loved by people where they actually put them in the house. So once that negative energy is in a doll and it's placed in a loving family home, then that's when that entity can come out and then look for a host within that family home. What is the most scared I've ever been? I think it was when I first became ordained as an exorcist. My first ever exorcism was one of the most scariest I've ever performed. And I was very young, and I was with a really well-known exorcist who now has passed on, sadly. And we went into this house. It was a young boy, and this young boy was possessed by a Polish airman from an RAF base, because his father used to own an RAF base where it was hired out for antiques and fairs and things like that. And this little boy kept saying he could see rabbits, he could see different people. This spirit would change personality, and that's what we call a shapeshifter. And that is a negative soul adjusting itself so this young boy felt comfortable with it. But over a period of time, this young boy pushed his mum down the stairs, broke a leg, broke her arm, started getting aggressive. The parents said he looked different, he changed. So we was called in, and when I arrived, I was absolutely petrified. This young boy was laid on the bed. He was only very young, and he looked really old. And I think, nothing like the horror movies, but I think because he'd been in bed for such a long time, he looked pale, he had really dark eyes. But this young boy spoke fluent Latin. He came from an underprivileged family, and what I mean by that, they didn't take him to a private school so he could learn Latin. He spoke fluent Latin, and that scared me, that petrified me. And we did perform an exorcism, and the boy is still with us. He went to university, and he's doing very well. I do hear from him from time to time. But that, for me, will always be in the back of my head, thinking that a very young boy under the age of 10 can speak fluent Latin. Do demons wear clothes? They certainly do. They don't walk around naked. People don't understand that there's demons amongst us, even now. And demons wear clothes like we wear clothes, and that is because they're trying to fit in. They're trying to be one of us, and they're very good at disguising themselves. And for me, it's a really funny reaction when I meet somebody, when I put my robe on or my dog collar on and I'm carrying my bag that I've got with me today, and I meet somebody for the first time, and I think there's something strange about them. It's all about their eyes. And normally anything demonic, because I'm ordained, will look very uncomfortable with me and want to back off. Some demons are called shapeshifters, and shapeshifters are entities or not nice souls who kind of go from one thing to another. So they could potentially be a dog, they could be a cat, they could be any kind of animal, they could be a person, they could be your mum, your dad. We've investigated areas where people have said they've heard the mum, they've heard the dad, and that's to lure you in, to make you feel comfortable. And they will appear however you feel comfortable, and that's to make you welcome them in. Once you've welcomed a demonic entity in, then that's when the problems start. How many people just think you're mad? I would say loads of people think I'm mad. It's very hard to tell somebody that you're talking to dead people. And I think a massive part of the population do believe, but there is I would say a quarter of the population who are dead against it, don't believe in it, maybe because for religious reasons or for whatever personal reasons may be. But I have met people who think I'm crazy. My relatives, some of my relatives think I'm mad because they can't do it, they don't believe in it. And many people, once you talk to them, they say, if I see it, then I'll believe it. So it's seeing to believe. So, and I think that's with everyone. They want to see it, they want to touch it, they want to believe it's there. So a lot of people think I'm crazy. And this one is, what tools do you use? As an exorcist, we use various Bibles, and we have a bag. This is my bag. We have crucifixes, which we all have a crucifix. You all know what a crucifix looks like. We have holy water. This is blessed. We have to robe up, and we bless the water from a font. Some people use black salt, some use natural salt, and then we bless it and it becomes holy. Sometimes I have 3 Bibles, sometimes I have 2. This is New and Old Testament, and this is my book of services. So this is a book that you only get when you become ordained, and this has got the exorcism rites in. If I lost this, it'd be a massive sacrifice. So I've got to really look after this book. And this has got exorcism prayer, this has got deliverance prayer, and this is the book that I will use the most to help perform exorcism. We have what we call water sprinklers, which are holy water goes in, and you enter it from the bottom here, and then you unscrew the top, and as you're saying exorcism prayer, throughout the prayer, there's certain moments in that prayer where you'll do the sign of the cross and you use the holy water. And then there's my stole, which is very valuable. This is gold, this is solid gold. And this is what we do to robe up. Purple is a pure colour. And this is why we always use purple as a colour. But every time we take this out, we should do the sign of the cross. And it's really, really powerful to wear this. What does Satan look like? When I was young, I believe I was touched by the devil. It's when I first started finding my belief system in religion. It's when I first started being interested in becoming an exorcist. So I already started training as an exorcist. And I was laid in bed one night, and I was fast asleep. And then I was woken up by somebody walking into the room, and all I could see was a black shadow. I saw no face, saw nothing. I saw no gown. I just saw this black mist, this shadow. And I was paralyzed. I couldn't move on the bed. Now, loads of skeptical people out there are going to say I was dreaming. I wasn't dreaming. I knew I was awake. And I can remember looking around the room, and I remember looking at myself, wondering why I couldn't move. And out of this mist came this long hand and grabbed my face, and I could feel my skin being pulled. And at this moment in time, I was petrified. I thought, what do I do? Where am I going? Who is this thing? What is it? I said the Lord's Prayer, and I said some of the prayers that I would trained at that time to say, bearing in mind I wasn't qualified at this point, so I didn't understand everything. And within that, this entity just dispersed. It was always like a powder just dropping to the floor, but then it just like, the powder was really heavy and it just went back under the door frame and disappeared. And I do believe that Satan looks like your worst fear. So whatever you're scared of, that's what he looks like. Why can you see things that I can't? Prove you're not making this up. I think it's hard for me to prove I'm not making it up. Unless you go see me live at a show or something like that, where you can see me giving messages to loved ones where they're crying in the audience, and only that person receiving that message can say it's true or not. For somebody, looking from the outside in, it's very difficult for them to say whether it's genuine or not, because you're not receiving that message. It's not personal to you. So while I'm sat here now, there's nothing I can do to prove that I'm not making it up, because I don't know who this message is from. As far as exorcisms, it goes through a process where we have access to doctor's notes, we have access to medical reports, you have assessments, you have psychological assessments. So it goes through a process before any exorcist is called in. So that makes it very difficult and makes it very real, because all these boxes have been ticked. Now, I did say earlier that sometimes mental health and various things like that can have an impact, and it's a very fine line between mental health and possession. But because we've gone through this protocol of deliverance rules where you have assessments, that proves that you are clinically sane. And there's always a doctor present or a psychologist present there to prove and for the welfare of that person you perform an exorcism on.
And generally with, institutions like medical institutions, doctors, psychiatrists, how is exorcism viewed on the whole by these other professionals?
I think some medical people don't understand exorcism, but they understand that medical treatment isn't working. And we've recently done an exorcism where the doctor actually tried to contact the church and say, look, we do have a client who is having issues. Medically, we can't find anything wrong. Do you think there's anything else that we can't see, or is it unexplained? So I think we're moving forward, and I do think that doctors and medical people now are realizing that there's other things out there in this universe that they can't explain medically, and they do need a help or advice. Is what I do considered Christian? Now, I'm very religious, I am a Christian, and not many people realize or understand that every faith has an exorcist. So as a psychic, Christians and particular religions, other religions, don't accept psychics. They believe it's devil worship. But for me, I came into exorcism after I was a psychic, and I was invited within a priesthood that made me ordained, or made me become ordained, because they wanted me to work for them rather than against them. Do I believe in hell? I think that's a very personal belief, and for me, I don't want to upset anyone out there, but I think sometimes we're living in hell now. We're here to be challenged. We're here to find out what's good and what's bad. So this is a school, this is a learning process we're going through now.
Thank you. Maybe just...
The same guy going round and round and round.
Do you think he's demonic?
It's one of my demons.
Doesn't want me to answer the question.
Yeah.
Challenge of life.
yeah. So I do believe in hell, but I also believe hell is what we're frightened of. Because if you think about it, if Lucifer popped down now and he gave you a fiery pit, I'm not frightened of fire, so that wouldn't be really hell to me. But if he brought me snakes, I'm petrified of snakes, so that would be my hell. And I think every single person is frightened of something. And demonic entities, or Lucifer, looks at finding out what that may be, and that's how they punish you. That's your punishment. That's your hell. How bad do demons smell? That's funny, because demons do smell. And the easiest way to explain it is like rotten eggs, really. It's a very strong sulfury smell. If you go into an environment and you're smelling that, then I'm not saying potentially it could be demonic entity. There's other explanations, obviously, but a demonic entity will have a smell to them. Some say it's like an eggy smell, which I've smelled loads of times before. Some people say it's like a damp, fusty smell, which I've had that smell around me before as well. And if you're in a clean environment and you're dealing with somebody potentially with a possession, there will be that smell when you start performing exorcism. You will have like a damp, fusty, really unusual smell that you can't explain. What happens to you when you die? Or what do I believe happens to you when you die? I think that's a personal question. I think for me, I believe that we're here as a lesson in a school to learn good and bad mistakes. And I believe in reincarnation, so I believe if we haven't learnt our lessons, we'll be brought back as a different person. I do believe in retribution, so I do believe sometimes that if we've committed a sin in this life, we'll be brought back to suffer that sin done to us, so we understand what that means. I believe when we pass over, we go to a better place. And like in my previous question, we mentioned hell, what is hell? And that is whatever our worst nightmare is. And I believe that's what heaven is as well, because You know, heaven for me could be something beautiful and totally different to everybody else in this room with me or you as a viewer. So I believe that when our spirit or when our soul passes over to the other side, I believe that we're met by Jesus Christ and the angels. And then it's up to them to decide whether we're going to be reincarnated or we're going to pass over to our next life. Because I believe there's another life out there, and I believe there's several lives out there, and every single life is a platform to progress into our next level. So I do believe in heaven, and I do believe in Jesus Christ, and I do believe in angels, and I do believe that certain people on this earth plane are angels as well.
Do nuns drink alcohol? They certainly do. The answer to that is yes, and if you'd like to ask me what my tipple is, it's a bottle of Newcastle brown ale.